I stand outside my own home at midnight watching through the window as my son Derek and daughter-in-law Madison celebrate inside. My suitcase sits beside me on the porch I built with my late husband 37 years ago. The locks have been changed. My bank accounts have been emptied. $4.2 million from my husband's life insurance settlement, gone. Madison had demanded I sign papers for family unity, and when I refused to hand over my bedroom to make space for Madison's mother, they threw me out. But they made one crucial mistake. 18 months have passed since my beloved husband Frank died from lung cancer, and I'm still learning how to breathe without him. I'm Stacy, 65 years old, a retired elementary school teacher who spent my life savings on Frank's experimental treatments when the doctors said there was nothing more they could do. The $4.2 million life insurance payout was meant to secure my future to honor Frank's wish that I'd never have to worry about money after he was gone. My son Derek is 38, works as a regional sales manager for a medical supply company, but has always struggled financially due to poor investment choices and an expensive taste for gadgets he can't afford. He married Madison 2 years ago, a whirlwind romance that happened so fast, I barely had time to get to know her before she became part of our family. Madison is 34, supposedly a former pharmaceutical sales rep who quit work after marrying Derek, claiming she wanted to focus on family. The manipulation began so subtly I almost missed it entirely. Madison would make offhand comments about how the house was too big for one person, how dangerous it was for someone my age to live alone in such a large space. She'd bring up news stories about elderly people falling downstairs or forgetting to turn off the stove, always with this concerned look that seemed so genuine at the time. Her own mother, Carol, started making extended visits, supposedly recovering from minor surgery that required someone to look after her. Carol would comment on how outdated my furniture was, how the family photos of Frank and me made the living room feel like a museum. Madison would nod along, saying the house needed updating for better resale value, as if selling my home was already a foregone conclusion. Slowly, Madison began rearranging things. Frank's favorite reading chair disappeared from the living room, replaced with some modern monstrosity she claimed was better for my back. Our wedding photo that had sat on the mantel for 43 years was moved to a back hallway, replaced with abstract art that looked like someone had sneezed paint onto canvas. When I protested, Madison would get that wounded look and say she was just trying to help me move forward with my grief. The real warning bells should have started ringing when I began finding my personal papers scattered around. I'd come home from my weekly grief counseling group to find my financial documents spread across the kitchen table. When I asked Madison about it, she'd smile sweetly and say she was just trying to help me organize things, that I seemed overwhelmed by all the paperwork that comes with losing a spouse. Derek supported her completely, which hurt more than I can express. My own son, the boy I raised to be honest and fair, was telling me I was being paranoid when I expressed concerns about Madison going through my private documents. He said his wife was just trying to help, that I should be grateful someone cared enough to assist with the complicated financial matters I clearly couldn't handle on my own. The first major red flag came when I found a real estate appraisal hidden in Derek's coat pocket. A professional evaluation of my home had been conducted without my knowledge or permission. The appraiser had been through every room, documented every feature, and estimated the market value down to the last $1,000. When I confronted Derek about it, demanding to know why my house had been appraised without my consent, he became defensive and evasive. He claimed it was just for insurance purposes, that their financial advisor had recommended updating the property valuation for estate planning. But I noticed the appraiser's business card had Madison's handwriting on the back, with a note that read "Expedite closing" in her distinctive looping script. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of my house settling around me. This was the home Frank and I had bought as newlyweds, where we'd raised Derek, where we'd planned to grow old together. Every creaking board and rattling window had a story, a memory attached to it. The idea that someone was planning to sell it out from under me made my chest tight with panic and rage. I tried to talk to Derek the next morning to explain how violated I felt by the secret appraisal, but Madison was there as always, mediating the conversation and steering it toward her preferred narrative. She made it sound like I was overreacting, that family members looking out for each other's interests was perfectly normal. She reminded Derek of how confused I'd seemed lately, how I'd been misplacing things and forgetting appointments. The truth was, I hadn't been misplacing anything. Madison had been moving items and then acting concerned when I couldn't find them. She'd been intercepting my mail and then claiming I'd forgotten about appointments that had been rescheduled without my knowledge. It was a systematic campaign designed to make me doubt my own competence, and it was working on Derek even if it wasn't working on me. As I watched my son nod along with his wife's explanations, I realized that Madison wasn't just after my money. She was after my entire life, my independence, my sense of self. And she was using my own child as the weapon to destroy me. Madison's campaign to undermine my confidence became more sophisticated and relentless. She would point out errors in my checkbook that I was certain I hadn't made, mathematical mistakes that appeared overnight in my careful record keeping. When I insisted the numbers had been changed, she would exchange meaningful glances with Derek, the kind of look that said, "Poor thing, she's losing it." She suggested I needed professional help managing my finances, that the stress of widowhood was affecting my judgment. Coincidentally, she had the perfect solution. Her college roommate Jessica, who specialized in elder financial planning and could help me navigate the complex world of investments and tax planning. Jessica was a polished woman in her early 40s, with expensive clothes and a briefcase full of official-looking documents. During our meeting at my kitchen table, Jessica spread out charts and graphs that made my assets look chaotic and poorly managed. She recommended consolidating everything under Derek's name for tax purposes and estate planning efficiency. The way she explained it, I would still have complete access to my money, but having Derek as the primary account holder would protect against potential financial exploitation and provide better tax advantages. Madison sat beside me during this presentation, occasionally reaching over to pat my hand in what looked like comfort, but felt like restraint. She would nod encouragingly whenever Jessica mentioned simplifying my financial life or reducing my paperwork burden. Derek sat across from us asking intelligent questions about investment strategies and inheritance tax implications, playing the role of the concerned son looking out for his mother's best interests. But I had been managing money successfully for decades. Frank and I had built our retirement savings from nothing, had weathered market crashes and economic uncertainty through careful planning and conservative investing. I didn't need a 30-something pharmaceutical sales rep and her convenient financial advisor friend to tell me how to handle my affairs. Madison also began systematically isolating me from my support network, though she did it so cleverly that it took me weeks to notice the pattern. She would schedule family dinners during my bridge club meetings, claiming Derek's work schedule only allowed him to visit on Tuesday evenings. When my sister Helen called from Phoenix, Madison would answer the phone and say I was resting or not feeling well, that the grief was really taking a toll and I needed to limit social interactions. She convinced Derek that my longtime friends were negative influences who didn't understand modern family dynamics. According to Madison, my bridge club friends were filling my head with paranoid ideas about family members taking advantage of elderly relatives. She painted them as jealous busybodies who resented the close relationship Derek and I shared. The isolation was devastating in ways I hadn't anticipated. These women had been my friends for 20 years or more. We'd supported each other through divorces, deaths, health scares, and family crises. Losing their regular presence in my life left me feeling unmoored and uncertain exactly what Madison intended. The legal document trap was perhaps her most insidious move. Madison arrived one afternoon with a thick folder of official papers explaining that Derek's financial advisor had recommended updating all of my beneficiary information and estate planning documents. She made it sound routine, like updating an insurance policy or renewing a driver's license. Hidden among legitimate-looking forms for updating bank beneficiaries and insurance policies were power of attorney documents and property transfer agreements. The language was dense and technical, filled with legal terminology that would intimidate anyone without a law degree. Madison sat beside me as I read, occasionally pointing out sections she claimed were standard boilerplate language. When I asked to take the documents to my own attorney for review, Madison's reaction was swift and emotional. Her eyes filled with tears as she asked if I didn't trust my own family. She talked about how hurtful it was to have her motives questioned when she was only trying to protect me from potential financial predators. Derek joined in, expressing disappointment that I was making everything so complicated when they were just trying to ensure my security. The pressure to sign was intense but subtle. Madison would mention news stories about elderly people being scammed by strangers, emphasizing how important it was to have trusted family members legally authorized to protect my interests. She talked about how much simpler life would be once all the paperwork was properly organized and filed. Meanwhile, Carol's temporary visit stretched from weeks into months. Her supposed house repairs required increasingly extensive work, from minor foundation issues to major structural problems that would take contractors months to address. Madison suggested I move to the smaller guest bedroom so Carol could use the master suite because of her mobility issues following the surgery. The master bedroom was where Frank and I had slept for 37 years. It contained his clothes still hanging in the closet, his books on the nightstand, the window seat where he'd sit reading the morning paper. It was the most private space in my home, filled with intimate memories of our life together. The idea of giving it up to accommodate Madison's mother felt like surrendering the last sanctuary I had left. When I refused to relocate to the guest room, Madison accused me of being selfish and unwelcoming to family in need. She made Carol's living situation sound desperate, painting me as a heartless woman who would rather cling to empty rooms than help a sick relative. Derek supported his wife completely, saying he was embarrassed by my lack of hospitality toward his mother-in-law. The final revelation that showed me the true scope of Madison's deception came when I discovered she had been secretly recording our conversations. I found her phone accidentally left open to a voice memo application while she was outside getting the mail. The recording was labeled with my name and date, supposedly documenting instances of confusion about medication schedules. But when I listened to the recording, I realized Madison had edited our conversation to remove her own questions and prompts, making my responses sound disconnected and confused. She had created audio evidence of mental decline that didn't exist, carefully crafting a narrative that would support claims of incompetence. I understood then that Madison wasn't just trying to steal my money. She was building a legal case to have me declared mentally incompetent, to strip away my autonomy completely and permanently. Every seemingly helpful gesture, every expression of concern, every suggestion about simplifying my life had been part of a calculated plan to destroy my independence and take control of everything Frank and I had worked our entire lives to build. The confrontation came during what Madison called a family meeting scheduled for a Sunday evening, when she knew I'd be tired from the weekend and more likely to be compliant. She set the scene carefully preparing Derek's favorite dinner and opening a bottle of wine to create a relaxed atmosphere that would make her demands seem reasonable. Madison presented me with an ultimatum disguised as a loving intervention. She had prepared a folder containing all the legal documents we'd discussed, along with what she claimed was evidence of my declining mental state. According to Madison, I had two choices: sign all the financial paperwork for everyone's security and permanently relocate to the guest bedroom, or Derek and Madison would have to consider other living arrangements for all of us. She delivered this threat with tears in her eyes, claiming it broke her heart to have to take such drastic measures. She talked about how worried she and Derek were about my safety, how they'd noticed increasing confusion and forgetfulness that made independent living dangerous for someone my age. The way she presented it, forcing me to sign over control of my finances, was an act of love, not theft. Derek sat beside his wife, nodding along with her concerns and adding his own observations about my supposed deterioration. He mentioned times when I'd seemed disoriented or confused, instances that I knew had been manufactured by Madison's manipulation, but that Derek apparently believed were genuine signs of cognitive decline. Jessica arrived with a notary public claiming the documents had to be executed immediately to meet tax filing deadlines. The notary was a serious-looking man in his 50s who spread the papers across my dining room table with businesslike efficiency. Jessica explained that everything had been prepared according to the latest estate planning strategies, and that any delay might result in significant tax penalties. As I read through the documents more carefully than I had been allowed to before, I discovered they included transferring the house deed entirely to Derek's name and establishing him as the sole beneficiary of my life insurance settlement. These weren't routine beneficiary updates. They were complete asset transfers that would leave me with nothing but a small monthly allowance controlled by my son. When I refused to sign and demanded time to consult with my own attorney, Madison's calm facade cracked completely. She exploded in fury, accusing me of destroying our family and being a selfish old woman who didn't care about Derek's future or financial security. She claimed I was preventing them from buying their own home because I was hoarding resources I couldn't possibly need at my age. Derek joined in the attack, expressing frustration that I was making everything so difficult and complicated. He said he was tired of constantly worrying about my welfare, and that signing the documents would give him peace of mind knowing I was properly protected. He made it sound like my refusal to surrender control was causing him emotional distress and damaging his marriage. The false emergency came the next day. Madison burst into the house in hysterics, claiming Carol had fallen down the stairs at her temporary housing and needed immediate surgery that wasn't covered by her insurance. She produced medical bills totaling $80,000, demanding that I write a check immediately to prevent Carol from being discharged from the hospital without proper treatment. The medical documents looked official enough, printed on letterhead from a local hospital with doctor signatures and detailed treatment codes. Madison was sobbing as she explained how Carol was lying in pain, while bureaucrats argued about payment authorization. She made it sound like Carol might die without immediate financial intervention that only I could provide. When I insisted on calling the hospital directly to verify the emergency and discuss payment options with the billing department, Madison became hysterical. She screamed that I was wasting precious time while her mother suffered, that my paranoid suspicions were preventing a sick woman from getting necessary medical care. She accused me of caring more about money than human life. Derek supported his wife's demands, saying he was ashamed of my callous response to a family medical emergency. He offered to drive me to the hospital immediately so I could see Carol's condition for myself, but Madison quickly explained that Carol was heavily sedated and couldn't receive visitors. The story kept changing in small ways that would have been obvious red flags if I hadn't been overwhelmed by the emotional pressure they were applying. The final ultimatum came that evening. Derek told me I had 24 hours to cooperate with what he called the family plan or find somewhere else to live. He said Madison's emotional health was being damaged by my constant suspicion and resistance that my negative attitude was poisoning their marriage and making it impossible for them to feel comfortable in what they now considered their home. Madison added that my stubborn refusal to accept help was forcing them to consider more drastic measures. She mentioned adult protective services and competency evaluations, making it clear that if I didn't voluntarily surrender control, they would pursue legal channels to have it taken from me. She claimed to have documentation of my mental decline that would support their petition to the court. That night, I went to bed early claiming a headache that wasn't entirely feigned. As I lay in the darkness of my bedroom, the room Madison wanted to take from me, I could hear Derek and Madison talking in the kitchen below. Their voices carried through the old heating vents, and what I heard chilled me to the bone. Madison was laughing as she described how easy it had been to manipulate me. She told Derek about staging incidents to make me seem confused about editing recordings, to create false evidence about the fake medical bills she'd created using templates downloaded from the internet. She talked about finding a buyer for the house through her cousin's real estate development company, someone willing to pay far above market value for a quick sale. Derek was asking questions about the timeline, wanting to know how soon they could complete the financial transfers and put me in what Madison called appropriate care. Madison explained that once I was declared mentally incompetent, they could place me in a low-cost nursing facility and use the money saved on my care to fund their own lifestyle improvements. The most chilling part was when Madison described her long-term plan. She had researched my family's medical history and life expectancy, calculating how many years she would need to maintain minimal care for me before inheriting everything outright. She talked about my life like it was a business problem to be solved efficiently and profitably. As I listened to my son and daughter-in-law plan my destruction with the casual tone of people discussing vacation arrangements, I realized that everything I thought I knew about my family was a lie. Derek wasn't a loving son who had been misled. He was an active participant in a scheme to rob me of everything Frank and I had built together. And Madison wasn't just a greedy opportunist. She was a predator who had systematically destroyed my life for financial gain. But as I lay there in the darkness, something inside me shifted. The grieving widow who had spent 18 months feeling lost and vulnerable was gone. In her place was the woman who had raised a family while Frank was deployed overseas, who had managed our finances through economic uncertainty, who had fought insurance companies and medical bureaucracies to get Frank the care he needed. I was done being a victim. I lay awake for the rest of that night, but I wasn't paralyzed by fear or grief anymore. I was planning. For 42 years, I had taught fifth graders who thought they could outsmart me with elaborate schemes and creative excuses. I had handled every family crisis while Frank was deployed overseas as a Navy engineer, managing household emergencies and financial challenges with calm efficiency. I had navigated our finances through 3 recessions, always ensuring we had enough saved for whatever storms might come. Madison and Derek had made a crucial error in their calculations. They saw a grieving 65-year-old widow and assumed she would be easy prey. They had no idea they were dealing with a woman who had spent decades solving problems, managing crises, and outmaneuvering people who underestimated her intelligence. My first priority was gathering evidence without arousing suspicion. I contacted my neighbor's grandson, a college student named Tommy, who helped elderly residents in the neighborhood with technology issues. I told him I wanted to learn how to record conversations on my phone to preserve family memories and stories about his grandfather. Tommy was delighted to help, showing me how to use a small digital recording device and explaining how to transfer files to a computer for safekeeping. Over the following weeks, I systematically documented every conversation with Madison and Derek. I learned to activate the recording device, subtly capturing their lies and threats, without them realizing they were providing evidence for their own prosecution. Madison's arrogant confidence worked in my favor. She never suspected that the confused old woman she thought she was manipulating was actually building a legal case against her. I verified Madison's claims about Carol's medical emergency by calling the hospital directly. The billing department had no record of anyone named Carol requiring emergency surgery or generating $80,000 in medical bills. When I described the documents Madison had shown me, the representative explained that the formatting and billing codes were incorrect, clearly indicating fraudulent paperwork. My investigation into the fake medical bills led me to Madison's computer when she left it unattended during one of her shopping trips. I discovered templates for creating false medical documents, saved files containing practice versions of the bills she had shown me, and email correspondence with someone named Jessica about timing the financial fraud for maximum impact. Madison had been planning this deception for months, possibly from the moment she married Derek. The banking investigation revealed even more disturbing information. When I contacted my longtime financial advisor privately explaining that I needed to verify recent account activity, I learned that someone had been attempting to access my accounts using forged signatures and fake authorization forms. The bank's fraud department had already flagged multiple suspicious activities, but hadn't contacted me directly because the attempts appeared to come from family members. Madison had tried to add herself as an authorized user on my credit cards by claiming to be my designated caregiver. She had attempted to wire transfer funds to offshore accounts using power of attorney documents that the bank's legal department determined were likely fraudulent. Every action she had taken left a digital trail that would be impossible to explain away. I needed legal representation, but not the family attorney Madison had recommended. Through my research at the local library, I found Patricia Williams, a sharp attorney in her 50s, who specialized in elder abuse and financial fraud cases. Patricia had a reputation for aggressive advocacy and a track record of successful prosecutions against family members who exploited elderly relatives. My meeting with Patricia opened my eyes to the full scope of what Madison and Derek were attempting. According to Patricia, their actions constituted multiple felonies, including financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit fraud, and attempted money laundering. The evidence I had already gathered was strong enough to support criminal charges, but Patricia recommended we continue collecting documentation to build an ironclad case. Patricia explained that elder financial abuse was a rapidly growing crime that often went unpunished because victims were embarrassed to report family members or too intimidated to pursue legal action. She was eager to prosecute a case with such clear evidence and multiple witnesses, knowing that successful convictions would send a message to other potential perpetrators. While building the legal case, I had to maintain my performance as Madison's intended victim. I began acting the part she wanted to see, confused, dependent, and grateful for her guidance. I would ask for help with simple tasks I understood perfectly, express appreciation for her patience with my supposed forgetfulness, and appear overwhelmed by financial paperwork that I could have completed in my sleep. Madison became increasingly confident as she watched me apparently deteriorate, according to her script. She started making mistakes, becoming careless about hiding evidence, and discussing their plans openly, because she believed I was too confused to understand what was happening around me. Her arrogance was providing me with exactly the evidence I needed to destroy her. I reached out to my sister Helen, who had been trying to contact me for months without success. When I explained how Madison had been intercepting our communications, Helen was furious and immediately offered whatever support I needed. She had been worried about my isolation, but had been told by Derek that I was going through a difficult adjustment period and needed space to grieve. Helen connected me with additional resources, including her own attorney contacts and a network of family friends who could provide character witness testimony. She also revealed that Madison had been asking detailed questions about our family's financial history during Derek's wedding information that now seemed clearly connected to planning the fraud scheme. My documentation process became methodical and comprehensive. I created detailed timelines of Madison's lies with supporting evidence, including recorded conversations, copies of fake documents, witness statements from neighbors who had observed her behavior, and bank records showing attempted unauthorized access. Every claim I would eventually make in court had multiple forms of supporting proof. The most damning evidence came when Madison made her final push to complete the financial transfers. She presented me with revised legal documents during another manufactured emergency this time, claiming Derek needed immediate access to family funds for a business investment opportunity that would secure everyone's financial future. The documents would have transferred complete control of all my assets to Derek, with Madison listed as the secondary beneficiary and decision maker in case of Derek's incapacity. As I pretended to consider signing, I secretly activated my recording device and got Madison to explicitly describe her plans on tape. In her eagerness to close the deal, Madison revealed everything. She admitted to forging documents, creating fake medical emergencies, and systematically isolating me from potential sources of help. She described her intention to have me declared incompetent and institutionalized in the cheapest possible facility. Most importantly, she confessed that the entire marriage to Derek had been planned specifically to gain access to my family's financial assets following Frank's death. Derek's participation in the conversation revealed that he knew exactly what they were doing and was actively helping plan my exploitation. There was no innocent manipulation or misguided concern for my welfare. My son was a willing participant in a scheme to rob me of everything Frank and I had worked our entire lives to build. As I sat at my kitchen table listening to them plan my destruction while pretending to review the fraudulent documents, I felt a sense of cold satisfaction. They thought they were moments away from completing their victory. Instead, they had just provided me with the final pieces of evidence needed to send them both to federal prison. Derek and Madison implemented their final phase, while I was at my grief counseling group session, the one appointment they still encouraged, because they believed it made me more emotionally vulnerable and easier to manipulate. I had been attending these sessions faithfully since Frank's death, finding comfort in sharing experiences with other widows and widowers who understood the devastating loneliness of losing a life partner. When I returned home that Tuesday evening, my key wouldn't fit in the front door lock. For a moment, I thought I was using the wrong key, but then I noticed that the hardware was completely different. The brass deadbolt Frank and I had installed 15 years ago had been replaced with a modern chrome mechanism that gleamed under the porch light. My belongings were waiting for me in black garbage bags lined up along the porch railing, like a grotesque receiving line. 43 years of accumulated possessions had been sorted through by strangers and deemed worthy of disposal. Frank's Navy uniform that I had preserved in acid-free tissue paper was crammed into a bag with old towels. The quilt my grandmother had made for our wedding was stuffed carelessly alongside cleaning supplies and kitchen utensils. Through the window, I could see Derek and Madison moving around inside what had been my home for decades. Madison was wearing my pearl necklace, the one Frank had given me for our 25th anniversary. She was directing Derek in rearranging furniture, pointing to items that needed to be removed or relocated. They moved through my living spaces with the casual familiarity of people who had already taken ownership. The neighborhood performance began when Madison noticed me standing on the porch. She opened the door just enough to speak through the gap, her voice pitched perfectly to carry to the nearby houses, where neighbors might be listening. With tears in her eyes, she began explaining to anyone within earshot how difficult it had been watching my mental deterioration and how they had no choice but to seek professional care for my safety. Madison described incidents of confusion and hostility that had never happened, painting a picture of dangerous behavioral changes that made independent living impossible. She mentioned finding me wandering the neighborhood at night in my nightgown, forgetting to turn off the stove and becoming violent when offered assistance. Every word was a carefully constructed lie designed to justify what they were doing to me. Derek joined the performance, expressing reluctant agreement with his wife's assessment of my condition. He talked about how painful it was to admit that his mother could no longer care for herself safely, how they had tried everything possible to help me maintain my independence. He sounded like a devoted son making an agonizing decision for my own protection. Several neighbors had come outside to witness the spectacle drawn by Madison's emotional presentation and the obvious distress of the situation. These were people who had known me for decades, who had watched Derek grow up, who had brought casseroles after Frank's funeral. Madison was counting on their sympathy and their reluctance to interfere in what appeared to be a family crisis. The false concern reached its peak when Derek offered to drive me to what he called a transitional care facility where I could receive proper supervision while they arranged for long-term placement. Madison added that they had already contacted several assisted living communities and that I would be much happier in an environment designed for people with my special needs. When I refused their offer and insisted on calling my own attorney, Madison suggested contacting emergency medical services to have me evaluated for my own safety. The threat was delivered with apparent reluctance, but the message was unmistakable. Comply with their plan or be forcibly removed by authorities who would be told I was a danger to myself. The Money Vanishing Act became clear when I tried to access my accounts using the mobile banking application on my phone. Every account showed a zero balance. The $4.2 million from Frank's life insurance settlement had been transferred to accounts I didn't recognize. My checking account, savings account, and investment portfolio had all been emptied through electronic transfers authorized by forged documents. Madison explained this development with apparent sadness, claiming that my confusion about financial matters had forced them to take protective action. According to her story, I had been making dangerous financial decisions and had nearly fallen victim to telephone scammers who were trying to steal my money. Derek and Jessica had worked together to secure my assets in protected accounts that would prevent any further losses. The false choice Madison offered was delivered with theatrical sorrow. I could sign myself into the nursing facility voluntarily and spend my remaining years in peaceful care, or I could refuse and force them to pursue legal proceedings to have me declared mentally incompetent. Madison held up a thick manila folder filled with what she claimed was medical documentation of my cognitive decline and evidence of my inability to make rational decisions. The folder contained the edited audio recordings, fake medical assessments she had created, and sworn statements from Derek and Jessica describing my supposed deterioration. Madison had been building this false case for months, creating a paper trail that would support her claims in court. She was confident that any judge would side with the concerned family members against the allegedly confused elderly woman. Derek and Madison's celebration was visible through the living room window as they toasted their apparent victory with champagne from Frank's wine collection. Madison had changed into one of my dresses, a blue silk outfit I had been saving for special occasions. She was walking through the rooms like a new owner conducting a final inspection, making notes about renovations and improvements. I could see Madison on her phone, probably calling her cousin's real estate development company to finalize the quick sale she had arranged. Derek was calculating something on a legal pad, likely dividing up the proceeds from liquidating my entire life's worth of accumulated assets. They moved through my memories and possessions like appraisers conducting an estate sale. Standing on the porch with my life reduced to garbage bags, I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. But I wasn't calling for help as a victim being thrown out of her home. I was calling as a woman who had spent months carefully building an ironclad legal case against people who had seriously underestimated their target. When the dispatcher answered, I reported multiple felonies in progress: elder financial abuse, identity theft, wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit fraud. I explained that I had extensive evidence, including recorded confessions, forged documents, and witness testimony. I requested immediate dispatch of both local police and federal agents, as the crimes involved interstate wire transfers and sophisticated financial fraud. As I spoke to the dispatcher, I watched Derek and Madison through the window, still celebrating their victory. What they didn't know was that Patricia had already filed emergency injunctions with the court, freezing all accounts and invalidating the fraudulent transfers. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit had been monitoring the offshore accounts Madison thought were hidden. Federal agents were already en route to execute arrest warrants. The first police car appeared at the end of the street just as I finished providing the dispatcher with details about the evidence I had collected. Then came another patrol car, followed by unmarked federal vehicles and a mobile crime scene unit. The quiet suburban neighborhood suddenly blazed with red and blue lights as law enforcement surrounded the house that Derek and Madison had thought they had successfully stolen. The federal agents moved with practiced efficiency surrounding the house, while Detective Rodriguez from the Financial Crimes Unit approached the front door. Through the window, I could see Derek and Madison's celebration freeze as they realized the flashing lights outside weren't from passing emergency vehicles. They were meant for them. Madison's first instinct was destruction of evidence. I watched her frantically deleting files from her laptop computer while Derek stood paralyzed by confusion and growing panic. She was trying to eliminate the digital trail of forged documents, fake medical bills, and correspondence with co-conspirators, but forensic experts had already secured copies of everything through Patricia's legal preparations. Agent Rodriguez read the charges through the door, his voice carrying clearly in the cold evening air: financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery of legal documents, and money laundering through offshore accounts. The offshore transfers Madison thought were untraceable had actually been monitored by federal authorities from the moment she established the accounts. When Derek opened the door, his face showed genuine shock at the scope of law enforcement response. This wasn't a misunderstanding about family financial arrangements. This was a major federal investigation with multiple agencies involved. The FBI, local police, and the district attorney's office had coordinated their response based on evidence that made prosecution virtually certain. Madison's composed facade cracked completely as Agent Rodriguez explained that every electronic transaction had been traced and documented. Her computer contained detailed plans for exploiting elderly relatives' correspondence with criminal associates about timing financial fraud for maximum profit and evidence of previous similar schemes targeting vulnerable adults in other states. The revelation of Madison's true background was perhaps the most shocking development of all. She wasn't a former pharmaceutical sales representative who had married Derek out of love. She was a career criminal who specialized in targeting elderly people through their adult children. Her real name was Michelle Carson, and she had defrauded at least 6 other families using variations of the same elaborate scheme. Jessica, the supposed financial advisor who was actually Madison's criminal partner, was arrested simultaneously at her office across town. The two women had been operating their elderly exploitation business for over 5 years, moving from state to state to avoid detection. Carol Madison's supposed mother was revealed to be an actress named Catherine Mills, who specialized in playing helpless elderly relatives in various confidence schemes. Derek's awakening to Madison's true nature was painful to witness even after everything he had done to me. When federal agents played recordings of Madison discussing him as a useful idiot who was easier to manipulate than previous targets, Derek's worldview collapsed completely. The woman he thought he loved had researched his family situation specifically after Frank's death and had targeted him as a pathway to my inheritance. Madison's immediate response was to blame everything on Derek, claiming she had been following his instructions and that he had forced her to manipulate me. She painted herself as another victim, saying Derek had threatened to leave her unless she helped him access my money. The recorded conversations proved this was completely false. Madison had been the mastermind while Derek was the manipulated accomplice. Federal agents executed search warrants for both the house and Madison's personal belongings, discovering additional evidence of the fraud scheme. Hidden in Madison's closet were blank legal documents ready to be filled out, for future victims' fake medical assessment forms and detailed financial profiles of other elderly targets in nearby communities. Patricia arrived with court orders immediately restoring my legal and financial rights. The fraudulent property transfers were invalidated, the forged power of attorney documents were declared null and void, and emergency injunctions secured all my assets pending full investigation. Additional civil judgments were awarded from Madison's personal property and Derek's retirement accounts to compensate for the emotional distress and legal costs of fighting the fraud. The community support that emerged was overwhelming and heartwarming. Neighbors who had witnessed Madison's performance earlier that evening came forward with statements about suspicious behavior they had observed over the past months. Mrs. Henderson from next door had seen Madison going through my mail when I wasn't home. Mr. Thompson from across the street had noticed Derek and Madison meeting with strangers in my driveway during hours when I was usually at medical appointments. My bridge club friends arrived en masse once Helen spread word about what had happened. These remarkable women who Madison had characterized as negative busybodies immediately organized practical support, including temporary housing offers, transportation assistance, and emotional support. They had been worried about my isolation, but hadn't wanted to intrude during what they thought was my normal grieving process. Even Derek's co-workers provided valuable testimony about Madison's behavior during company social events. Several people remembered her asking detailed questions about Derek's salary benefits and family financial situation during their wedding reception. Her interest in our family's money had been obvious to outsiders, even if Derek had been too infatuated to recognize her true motives. Dr. Thompson, who had been my physician for over 20 years, provided medical testimony completely contradicting Madison's claims about my mental state. His comprehensive evaluation showed normal cognitive function for someone my age, with no signs of the dementia or confusion Madison had been claiming. The fake medical assessments in Madison's possession were crude forgeries that wouldn't have fooled any legitimate healthcare professional. The investigation revealed the true scope of Madison and Jessica's criminal enterprise. Bank records showed they had stolen over $12 million from elderly victims across 7 states. They would identify recently widowed individuals through obituary notices, research their financial situations through public records, and then systematically infiltrate their families through romantic relationships or fake service provider connections. Derek's cooperation with federal authorities became complete once he understood how thoroughly he had been manipulated. Through court-mandated psychological evaluation, he learned about the sophisticated grooming techniques Madison had used to control his thinking and decision-making. The process was similar to other forms of psychological abuse involving isolation from support systems, gradual erosion of independent judgment, and systematic replacement of reality with the abuser's preferred narrative. As federal agents led Madison away in handcuffs, she made one final attempt to manipulate the situation by claiming her pregnancy prevented her from being safely incarcerated. Medical examination revealed this was another lie in a lifetime of deceptions. Even in her moment of defeat, Madison was still trying to con her way out of consequences through false sympathy appeals. The federal case moved quickly through the court system because the evidence was so comprehensive and the crimes so clearly documented. Madison's defense attorney tried to negotiate a plea bargain, but federal prosecutors were determined to seek maximum sentences to send a message about elder abuse crimes. The case became a landmark prosecution that would be studied by law enforcement agencies dealing with similar financial exploitation schemes. Justice was swift and comprehensive for all involved in the conspiracy against me. Madison received a 15-year federal prison sentence without possibility of parole for elder abuse, wire fraud, identity theft, and money laundering. The judge noted the particularly cruel nature of her crimes, emphasizing that targeting elderly individuals through their own children represented an especially heinous form of financial predation. Jessica received 12 years as a co-conspirator and repeat offender, with additional restitution requirements that would prevent her from ever working in any capacity involving financial services or elder care. Her fraudulent financial planning business was permanently dissolved, and her professional licenses were revoked in all states where she had operated. Catherine Mills, the woman who had posed as Carol, received 5 years probation in exchange for her cooperation with federal authorities investigating similar schemes in other jurisdictions. Her testimony helped prosecutors understand the full scope of the criminal network and led to additional arrests of people who had been targeting elderly victims across the southeastern United States. Derek's sentence was more complex because of his status as both a perpetrator and a victim of Madison's manipulation. He received 3 years supervised probation with requirements for psychological counseling, community service focused on elder abuse prevention, and complete restitution for legal costs and emotional damages. The court recognized that he had been psychologically manipulated while still holding him accountable for his actions against me. My financial recovery exceeded even my attorney's expectations. Not only did I regain the original $4.2 million from Frank's life insurance settlement, but federal asset forfeiture laws allowed additional damages of nearly $2 million from the criminal enterprise's seized properties and accounts. My financial security was now protected by legal trusts and professional oversight that would prevent any future exploitation while maintaining my complete personal autonomy. The house was immediately returned to my sole ownership with additional legal protections that would prevent any future fraudulent transfers or unauthorized access. Patricia helped me establish estate planning documents that were far more sophisticated than anything Madison could have circumvented, ensuring that my assets would be distributed according to my actual wishes, rather than anyone else's schemes. Derek's path to rebuilding our relationship was long and difficult, requiring months of family counseling and individual therapy to address the psychological manipulation he had experienced. Through court mandated counseling sessions, he began to understand how Madison had systematically isolated him from me and replaced his natural family loyalty with dependence on her approval and guidance. The counseling process was painful but necessary for both of us. Derek had to confront the reality that he had actively participated in planning my financial destruction and had been willing to institutionalize me against my will. I had to work through my own feelings of betrayal and decide whether forgiveness was possible given the magnitude of what he had done. Our relationship now exists within carefully established boundaries that protect my independence while allowing for genuine family connection. Derek understands that he will never again have any access to my financial information or decision-making processes. Our interactions are limited to social visits and family occasions with no discussions of money, property, or my personal affairs. The community response to my situation created lasting positive changes that extended far beyond my individual case. Local banks implemented additional protections for elderly customers, requiring multiple verifications for large transfers and automatic notifications to secondary contacts for unusual account activity. The police department established a specialized unit for investigating financial crimes against seniors. My Bridge Club friends rallied around me with fierce loyalty that strengthened friendships I had treasured for decades. Helen moved from Phoenix to be closer, purchasing a small house just 10 minutes away so we could support each other through our later years. The isolation Madison had created was replaced by a stronger network of genuine relationships based on mutual respect and authentic caring. I began volunteering with the National Center on Elder Abuse, using my experience to help other seniors recognize and resist financial exploitation attempts. My testimony before state legislative committees led to stronger laws protecting elderly individuals from family financial abuse and created better legal remedies for victims seeking to recover stolen assets. The speaking engagements I do for community organizations focus on empowering seniors to maintain their financial independence and trust their instincts when something feels wrong. Too many elderly people surrender their autonomy out of misplaced trust in family members or fear of being perceived as difficult or uncooperative. My message to other seniors is simple but powerful. True family love never requires surrendering your dignity, your independence, or your right to make decisions about your own life. Healthy adult relationships are built on mutual respect, not one person controlling another through manipulation threats or false emergencies designed to create artificial urgency. I learned that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for maintaining healthy relationships with people who might otherwise be tempted to take advantage of perceived vulnerability. Financial independence isn't about hoarding resources. It's about maintaining the freedom to make choices about your own life according to your own values and priorities. Frank's life insurance settlement now supports not just my own security, but also charitable work that prevents other families from experiencing what Derek and I went through. I've established a foundation that funds legal assistance for elderly abuse victims and educational programs that teach seniors how to protect themselves from financial predators. The renovations I made to my home eliminated every trace of Madison's influence, while creating new spaces that honor Frank's memory and embrace my independent future. The master bedroom became a peaceful retreat, filled with photographs of our life together and mementos of our 43-year marriage. The living areas now reflect my own tastes and interests, rather than someone else's vision of how I should live. Traveling has become one of my greatest pleasures, visiting places Frank and I had always planned to see together and creating new memories that honor his spirit while embracing my own continued growth. At 65, I'm not ending my story. I'm beginning a new chapter filled with wisdom, strength, and unshakable self-worth. The garden Frank and I planted together has become my sanctuary, a place where I can reflect on lessons learned and appreciate the simple beauty of growth and renewal. As I tend the roses he loved and plant new varieties that catch my fancy, I know that surviving Madison's assault on my life has made me stronger and more determined than ever to live fully and authentically. My final thought for anyone facing family manipulation or pressure to surrender control of their lives is this: you have the right to be treated with respect regardless of your age, and you have the power to protect yourself if you're willing to trust your instincts and take action. No one, not even family members, has the right to steal your independence, your dignity, or your peace of mind. Have you ever felt pressured by family members to make financial decisions that didn't feel right to you? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below about how we can better protect ourselves and our loved ones from manipulation and financial abuse. Please like this video if my story resonated with you, subscribe for more stories about overcoming life's challenges, and share this with anyone who might benefit from hearing that it's never too late to fight back and reclaim your life. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I hope it gives you strength to trust yourself and stand firm in your own boundaries. Remember, you're stronger than you know, and you deserve to live with dignity and respect at every stage of your life.